Where I got Netflix most wrong was I covered media my whole life, and I had never seen a U.S. company in video really penetrate the
outside
world.
the U.S.
Exactly. In the old days, international markets for U.S. companies were Australia, UK, and Canada. Do you know why? Because they speak English.
Right.
And there wasn't subtitles. There was not a big content factory in South Korea that they tapped into. Netflix changed that equation. So,
and they're the only streamer that's really done that.
That's has the global scale,
right.
True global scale. And when I say scale, it's about revenues. You know, they have 40 billion of revenues. More than half come from outside the U.S. Right?
Hi, I'm Steve Eisman, and welcome to my podcast, The Eisman Playbook. In my 35 years of experience of investing in markets, I've seen many ups and downs. You might know me because I was depicted in the book The Big Short by Michael Lewis and portrayed by Steve Carell in the movie of the same name. In this podcast, we are going to explore and analyze market trends, companies, and subsectors with various guests in and around the financial world. My goal here is simple, to educate. So come and join me as I share with you the Eisman Playbook. Hi, it's Steve Eisman, and this is another edition of the Eisman Playbook. Today is April 10th. It's a little after 3 p.m. Yesterday, the market went nuts. President Trump announced that there was going to be a 90-day delay on tariffs. NASDAQ was up over 12%, S&P was up 9%, and now it's 1 day later, and the market's retracing almost 50%, probably because it believes that it's not over.
Right.
And we're not going to talk about any of that today, thank God, because I think everybody is emotionally exhausted, and we need a break.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So my guest today is Michael Nathanson of Moffett Nathanson. We've known each other for a very, very long time. Moffett Nathanson is a boutique firm that specializes, I would call it, media stocks and their adjuncts.
Craig would say telecom stocks.
Right, telecom too.
Yeah.
So you cover telecom, you cover media stocks, you cover the cable companies, Disney, Fox, etc. Now, a little known fact, I'm a TV junkie. You know, I watch more TV than anybody on planet Earth that I know. So it's a joy to have you here, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
I just want everybody to know that generally speaking, boutique firms, I find, do much better research than bulge bracket firms. Michael's firm, Moffett Nathanson, is excellent. I actually did a deep dive on all your research that you guys have printed over the last probably 4 or 5 months. And I learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start with media. Let's start with a very simple but jarring statistic. Today, Netflix's market cap is about $400 billion.
Right.
Disney's is $150 billion. It used to be $300 billion. And Warner Brothers, which owns HBO, which used to be the hottest property in media, has a market cap of $21 billion. So we're going to talk about how in the world did we get here?
Right.
But to talk about it, let's go back in time. So we're going to climb into the hot tub time machine.
Okay.
A little movie reference.
Exactly.
And we'll go back to circa 2005.
Okay.
So in 2005, Google is still a very young company. Google got founded in 1998.
It's public 4 years at that point.
I went public in August 2004.
Okay, so
it's only a year.
Yeah.
Facebook only got founded in 2004, so it's not even an important entity. I don't even know if Netflix even existed in 2004, but if it did, all it was doing was giving you DVD rentals.
Right.
So it wasn't anything what it is today.
Right.
It's linear television, which some of our viewers probably don't even know what that is. That means you watch TV and broadcast TV and their commercials. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, once my favorite show, has been off the air for 2 years. I'm still in mourning,
right.
But I'm watching Smallville.
Right.
So let's go back to then.
Okay.
And let's just stick first with just television. Describe for me the landscape. Netflix is not a risk of any kind. What's the business like?
Okay. So Steve, I started my career at Sanford Bernstein in 1998. But in 2005, the year you referenced, I started covering U.S. media.
Huh?
So I went from Europe to U.S. And U.S. media in 2005, these were the kings, right? These were the kings of the world. They had amazing business models. The core of the model was pay TV, meaning that what once was free, meaning broadcast was free with an antenna, at that point, 75 million American homes were paying $50 a month for pay TV.
Well, explain that for example. So you have cable,
right? You have cable,
and you pay your cable operator a certain amount of money to get your cable, $50 a month.
Back then, $50 a month,
and then you would also pay in addition for premium channels,
right?
Like
so
HBO, Showtime,
would be $10 add-ons, right?
For each channel,
right? Exactly.
But there would be packages,
right?
So there'd
be promotions, you get into it for free this month.
So you would maybe it would cost you $75, $80, $90 a month to get everything you wanted,
right?
Okay,
and there was no other way around it, right? You could watch broadcast TV, but in big parts of this country, it was better to watch broadcast via cable because the signal was clearer. If you lived in the Rocky Mountains in rural America, Manhattan, right? And then as time went on, the programmers of that cable bundle started adding more and more content, right? They added more NFL games. They added more hockey and more premium movies. And yes, you added your premium HBOs and Showtimes, but the content kept getting better and better.
So you had the
and better.
Sci-Fi channel, for
yes,
example, which was new.
Yes,
right.
You added more news channels, right? So, and as you added more content, the price of the bundle kept going up.
Okay,
right. But there's no other way around it. And so let's separate.
If you were in Manhattan,
right,
there was no choice.
Right,
you're either going to pay cable to watch television, or you're not watching television.
Right. And then so cable was the beginning way we all received video, and then you started seeing DirecTV and Dish, which is satellite, start coming into the picture. And then the telcos, Verizon, created Fios. All of a sudden, you have this competition, and the programmers who own all that content would play one distribution platform off against another. So the price of their content kept going up.
So let's explain this. So Fios, Cablevision,
right? So
would compete for the packages. Right. They would pay the providers even more.
So I'm living in Westchester County.
Right.
Cablevision had a monopoly on Westchester County, and Fios, owned by Verizon, came up our street and wired it with fiber and said, "We want to sell you video to your home and broadband data with fiber." Sounds great, but they had to get the video programs, right? They had to go out to Viacom or NBC and get the rights to sell video to me. And all the companies held Verizon up because you can't really build a pay TV product
unless you have product.
Exactly.
Right.
And because they started competing in markets, Cablevision, which was a monopoly in Westchester, had to pay up as well.
Okay.
Because guess what? If you don't have the NFL, the Giant game on CBS this weekend,
okay,
you don't have my viewer.
So competition on the
distribution side.
Cable side created more profits for the distributors of programming.
Exactly. We also, in 2005, I remember this very well, so these companies also own film studios, right? And film studios operated with windows. What do we mean by windows? They're very smart. You would watch a movie, Hot Tub Time Machine, in the theater.
Right.
For, let's call it was available in theater for 180 days. It wasn't in the theater for 180 days, but for 6 months,
it could not be anywhere else.
And when that 6-month period ended, they created a DVD window at that point. So DVD was emerging, thanks to my friend Warren.
I'm sure there are people out there who
don't even know what DVDs are.
This was a disc that you could buy or rent to watch a movie.
Shout out to Warren Liebefarb, Warner Brothers, father of the DVD.
Right.
And basically the whole industry, the whole studio industry coalesced around this DVD format. So if you didn't see Hot Tub Time Machine in the theater, you could buy it or rent it, the DVD.
Right. And that was actually Netflix's original business was to
shipping.
You'd deal with Netflix and they'd ship you Hot Tub Time Machine, you'd watch it and you'd send it back.
Correct. Also, let's say you missed it, you didn't want to buy it, you could watch it on HBO about 6 months later.
Right. Maybe so that would be like an entire year after the
Exactly.
release.
And let's say you missed it on HBO, you could watch it on Comedy Central a year and a half later.
Okay.
Right? And then it comes back to HBO.
So the the entity that created Hot Tub Time Machine made movie in the theater.
Yep.
He made movie on a DVD. He made made money selling it to HBO.
Yep.
He then made money selling it to Comedy Central.
Right.
He made money 4 or 5 times.
Exactly. And an even better, an older movie, let's say The Godfather. The Godfather never was released on DVD in the original form because it was in the 1970s.
Right.
DVD did not exist. Well, guess what? If you were a film collector, now you have to go back and buy the DVD version of The Godfather. So the studios would package DVDs and say, hey, for a limited time only, get The Godfather on DVD for $20 a month.
So what would this is a very profitable business, obviously.
Yeah, both film and pay TV distribution.
So give me an idea of what were the margins like for these companies back then?
So for a cable network business, 25 to 45% margins.
So when you say cable, like give me an example of a cable network.
Discovery channel channels,
Okay.
or the Food Network, or
so those channels, the people who own them made 24, 25% margin.
as high as 45%, right?
I mean pre-tax income divided by revenue?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So
These are
big,
great
big margins.
businesses.
Okay.
Because the model was, you may not be watching Fox News in your home, but Fox News is carried on 100 million homes at the peak across this country. Everyone's paying for it, but not everyone's watching it.
Right.
Right. And also, some of these businesses, because you had a limited number of...
Let's just explain that for a second.
Okay.
So I have a cable package in Manhattan.
Uh-huh.
I may only watch CNN for news. I may not watch Fox for news.
Right.
But the cable operator is paying Fox to be on his package, whether I watch it or not.
Exactly. And in the beginning, middle, and almost end, there was a fixed number of channels available to you, right? So you paid for a bundle of channels, and there's no other way for you to watch that bundle, right? So if you're, again, a fan of Fox or CNBC or CNN or NFL or hockey, all the content was there.
Right.
And it was really hard to create new channels, right? So no one had a business plan. When you have 45% margins, you would say to me, Steve, you say, Michael, sounds like a great business. Why don't we just compete?
Why don't I create a channel?
Exactly. Well, the barriers to entry were getting on the cable dial, getting in the box. And they had enough programmers. They didn't need anyone else. So you had a locked-in advantage. Once you built your scale.
Once you were in, you're
in.
golden.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Right? The only thing is, and then on the film side, I would argue film historically has not been a great business, but during this golden age, because of DVDs, also globalization, turns out people in China like to watch some of these movies, people in Europe, Latin America. So screens, movie theaters started to open up robustly around the world.
This is a golden age.
Yeah, so when I started covering these stocks in 2005 to about 2012, 13, this was the golden age.
Okay.
As good as it got. As good as it got. Executives got paid very well. Shareholders made money. You wanted to work in this industry.
I mean, I forget the name of the guy who ran HBO.
There's a bunch of people.
But whoever ran it,
right,
that was like the best job in media.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
You got paid a fortune. You're not even the CEO of Time Warner. You're just the head of HBO.
Michael Fuchs at one point ran it.
Michael Fuchs ran it, right.
Yeah, a lot of people ran it. The only thing is, like, how can we kill this business? Which I know is where we're going.
Yes.
But this was a great business. This is the business we've chosen.
Right.
You know, but it was a great business, and it was hard to muck it up because this bundle of channels created real value for the consumer. Consumers, in my home of 4 people, any given night, 4 TV sets would be on.
And they were watching different
all
things.
Different things. And we're all satisfied at different levels, right? In any given night, we'd be watching HBO or watching a DVD, going to Blockbuster, which was a retailer that would sell videos and DVDs. That'd be a night's entertainment. We go to Blockbuster, we buy some popcorn, we rent a movie.
You rent a movie.
It was great.
I used to do that all the time.
Exactly.
Half the viewers, I'm sure, don't even know what Blockbuster is.
Exactly. So
it was a store.
These were great businesses, and I was privileged to cover them.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anyone at that point, get a job working in this industry. It's a great. I worked in Time Warner and MGM and Cablevision before I became an analyst. So I myself had worked in this industry. After business school, I left because I wanted to do more finance, but it was a great place to work.
Okay.
Time Incorporated would have a shoe shine person, and a drink cart. When Friday came along, someone would shine your shoes and bring around drinks when the issues went to bed. They had an executive dining room where I can ask anyone out for lunch. The company would pay for it. These are
wealthy countries, fat, big margins.
Yeah, these were like the pre-Google, pre-Apple, pre-Meta world of like
okay.
Great
so
companies.
This world lasted till when?
You could argue it lasted. I changed the 2007, 2010 great financial crisis started creating some pressures, right? Pay TV penetration started to slow. You started to hit a wall.
Okay.
At 90% of the country,
where are you going to go?
Had pay TV, right? So you couldn't grow if you're a programmer or a cable operator, satellite operator. Everyone who potentially could have the product had it.
Okay.
So what do you end up doing when volume is slowing? What do you end up doing?
Raise price.
You raise price, right? So you start raising price, and the programmers themselves started to fight for more and more sports rights. So sports rights were very, very valuable. Okay, so let me go back for a sec. Okay. In 2005,
this is a long story.
No shit,
but
right?
It's good.
Exactly. Am I allowed to curse on air?
It's a great story. You certainly are.
Okay, so you had leadership like Rupert Murdoch, Bob Iger, Jeff Bewkes that were thoughtful about long-term position.
So Murdoch is Fox, Iger is Disney. Bewkes is Time Warner.
Right. You had Brian Roberts, who was an outsider at Comcast, gets NBC in 2010.
Okay, he buys it.
He buys it on the cheap because GE at that point in time was
GE sold to Comcast, NBC at the bottom,
at the
absolute bottom.
Bottom of everything. Bottom of the economic cycle, bottom of the valuation cycle.
Everything.
So enter Brian Roberts and NBC, with NBC, a new entrant. And Brian Roberts, Comcast was the biggest distributor of video, so they had a very good position to build from. And then there's a company called Viacom, which broke themselves into two, and Viacom owned CBS, and Sumner Redstone ran Viacom, and he made an asinine decision to take one integrated company, and everyone else he was competing with were integrated, and break into two companies, CBS Broadcasting and Viacom Cable, right? And he had Les Moonves and Philippe Delon.
What's Viacom Cable?
Cable networks.
Cable networks.
Right. So that was, most of the other companies were run integrated with broadcasting cable in one company, but Sumner had this idea.
For those of you who know, the broadcast channels would be CBS, NBC, ABC,
right.
And then the Sci-Fi channel would be a cable channel.
Right. So when CBS became its own company, Les Moonves said, I'm not getting paid. When CBS is running over your satellite or cable dish, cable plant at this point in time, it's running for free. There's not a really big payment by the cable operator to the programmer. They're paying for the cable networks, let's say. But Les Moonves, who ran CBS, not Viacom, which Viacom on cable nets, he said, look, CBS is much more valuable than Nickelodeon, than Comedy Central, than BET. Damn it, we want $3 a month, right?
From the cable operators.
Right. And Philippe Delon and Viacom said, well, I want my fair share. I want my channels are still valuable. I want my same $7 a month, right? And both those guys were grabbing more and more.
From the cable operator.
Right. Now, if you're a broadcast network owner or a station owner who owns stations, you're like, well, Les Moonves is getting $3 for CBS. What's ABC worth? What's Fox worth, right? And all of a sudden, the broadcasters were getting paid for their signal, their content, which wasn't always the case. And that created a bit of a profit pressure for the people the distributors. Does that make sense to you? So if I'm,
in other words, if you're Comcast and you were basically getting CBS from almost
for
nothing,
free, exactly,
and now you got to pay for it, that hurts your margins.
Right. So guess what? They have to raise prices.
So the cable operator raise prices.
Okay. Right. And then sports.
So now all of a sudden, instead of paying $75 for my cable, I'm going to be paying $120.
Right. Because
or something like that.
Yeah. Because you used to pay $0 for broadcast networks if you're Comcast. And now it was $10.
Okay.
So I need $10 back from you. And then all of a sudden, Comcast merges with NBC, and they're like, we should get more sports rights because look at ESPN, which is was a really valuable network. Sports are good. Let's bid for some sports rights. And then Fox develops Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2. It's bid for sports rights. So all of a sudden, the price of sports
goes up.
Started going up. And again, as a programmer, the cost of sports goes up. I turn to you, my distributor, Mr. Comcast. You got to pay me more money because
for my sports,
because the NBA gets quadrupled on me.
Right. And so now the cable operator is paying more.
So at some point in 2013, 14, 15, we hit a wall on pay TV growth. We hit penetration, saturation, and pricing started going up. And you started to slowly see people were starting to cut the cord. They started saying, you know what?
I don't want to pay.
I don't need it for paid. $100, you know, if you don't love sport, $100 is a lot of money to watch a lot of these shows, right? At the same time, DVDs, which is one of my best calls ever that people thought I was wrong, DVD penetration hit a wall. People got tired of paying for DVDs.
Right.
You know, they got tired of paying for The Godfather. And we went from 0% penetration of DVDs to 90% penetration of DVD players. It was mature. So what did DVD owners do? They raised the price, right? So you had a lot of pricing, not a lot of volume. Oh, and by the way, you added more commercials on your cable network because if ratings are not growing, I'm going to add more commercials. So commercial minutes went up.
So basically, prices went up and the quality basically went down.
Exactly. And then what happens is, here comes Mr. Netflix and says, you know what?
So when did Netflix really start to become what it is?
I want to say 2012, 2014.
I remember this.
Okay. I thought it was nuts, right? Because I'm like, we wrote a piece in 2010 that said the only thing to fear is stupidity itself, because the idea was the only way you kill your business is by doing dumb things, right? You have a monopoly over your content and a business model that's really, really good. But what these guys started to do dumbly was they started to license shows
to Netflix.
And
so
they created.
Let's explain that. So in other words, Netflix is a company. It has no production at this time.
I have nothing.
It's just basically subscribe to Netflix, and they have whatever shows that they have. Where are they going to get these shows? It's an app for people who have shows.
It's an app, and you're connected TV, and people will say to me at that point in time, "What's an app, and what's connected TV?" Right? Because for most of this point in time, there was no way to get internet streamed to your TV set. Right? You had to get a cable box, attach it to your TV set, or satellite dish, attach it to your TV set to watch video. Right. So lo and behold, there was an unlock. The unlock was we can get streaming video to your TV. Right. And then Netflix said, you know what? We could start adding old library content. And don't worry, Mr. Media Company. This is a completely different business. It's not going to cannibalize, Comedy Central or TNT or TBS. We're going to show.
We're just going to buy old shows.
Yeah, who wants to watch The Office? It was a nice show. It was small on NBC. We're going to put The Office on Netflix. You can watch it whenever you want to watch.
So they would go to
NBC,
NBC, and they would buy the rights to The Office.
We want to give you like $5 million for rights that no one really thinks are very valuable.
Right.
And they're collecting dust in your library. It's not going to kill your business. And because your DVD business is slowing and pay TV is slowing,
it's free money.
It's free money.
Right.
And oh, by the way, Mr. Executive, you're getting paid to hit quarterly numbers. Why are you going to look negatively on this inflow of cash, right? So in 2012 or so, 2010 to 12, 13, you started to see more content pop up
on Netflix.
And we would be
all old content.
And we had Ted Sarandos at a conference. We said, Ted,
I'm sorry, who's this?
Ted Sarandos is the head of Netflix, the CEO of content. And then now he's a co-CEO. But we said to Ted, do you ever envision making original content on Netflix, right? You guys have all this library content. Do you ever want to go into originals? He's like, no.
Not us.
No, we don't want to do that. And then in 2000, I forgot the year. We'll go back. We'll edit this. You'll tell me when, in hindsight. They start doing original content and Netflix.
And what was like the first original content?
It was House of Cards.
I remember that.
David Fincher.
Right. And
Lilyhammer. Steve Eisman.
One of my favorite shows of all time.
That was the original show, actually.
I think Lilyhammer was before House of Cards.
It was. And then
I remember the greatest line. So for those of you who don't know what Lilyhammer is, so Steve Van Zandt, who is the lead guitarist for Bruce Springsteen. Yep. And he was also in The Sopranos. So they created a character exactly like he played in The Sopranos. And he's a mafia guy from Brooklyn, and he snitches on the family. So he has to go into witness protection. So I'll never forget it. The first episode, the U.S. attorney's talking to him and says, after the trial, because he has to testify, where do you want to go? And he says, I want to go to Lilyhammer. And they go, why do you want to go to Lilyhammer? He goes, because the Olympics were there. So then the show goes to Lilyhammer. It was a fish out of water show. It was masterful.
First show ever, right?
Yes.
So basically what happens is you start creating a substitute product, in terms of you create a video bundle that is
old and new.
Yep. And massively cheaper. Massively cheaper.
So so give me an example of how much cheaper it is to back then to do Netflix versus doing your cable bundle.
$7 versus $100.
Well, 7's a lot less than 100.
Exactly. But we kept saying at the time, guys, you can't be this stupid.
All right, so let's talk about that because I remember reading your research about this.
Stupid.
So what did the executives say? Like, why were they? By the way, Lennon, the Lennon,
not John
Lennon,
yeah.
the revolutionary, once said, "We will hang the capitalist with the rope that they will sell us."
Exactly,
and that is what happened.
That is the quote here. Exactly, that's what happened.
They sold the rights to their old stuff to create the enemy.
Exactly. Some companies saw it, like Fox saw this, and they started pulling their content. My good friends at Viacom and CBS, because they didn't have a hands-on owner, because Sumner Redstone was kind of checked out,
right? And
they got paid a ton of money.
It's for quarterly earnings.
Exactly. They kept feeding the beast, right?
Right. Jeff
Bewkes at Time Warner, they own HBO. They're worried about this, right? It's funny because Murdoch and Bewkes at Time Warner sold their company in like 2016, 17. They decided to exit the business.
Well, Bewkes, what do you mean Murdoch sold the business?
Fox sold the studio to Disney, right?
Right.
But for the longest time, this was like a slow-moving car crash. You're like, guys, Netflix at this point isn't that big. It's not a $400 billion company at the point in time.
Of course.
It's not that big. Steve, I can take it for another hour. I'm not going to take it down another hour. But there was an attempt by the industry to create their own kind of free streaming product that if you paid for TV, you got your own kind of white label Netflix.
Well, let's skip that.
Exactly. But that never worked. So problem is consortiums don't work. Greedy people tend to do short-term things.
So eventually, all these companies decide we got to compete with Netflix. We're going to create our own streaming.
Yes. And at the same time, so 2015, 2019, the bundle is wobbling, meaning that pay TV is not growing, but pay TV is losing about 1% or so of its users a year. Mm-hmm. So you have a business that's 90 million homes are paying for pay TV, 90 million. Maybe you're at 80 million.
Okay.
It's not bad. It's not bad. Enter 2020.
Okay.
And the pandemic.
Right.
Right. And even 2019, because Disney Plus launches at $5.99.
I remember.
With all this Disney content. And Disney got a tremendous reception by the market. They added more subs in a month than Netflix had added in years. It was an amazing launch, and their stock price went up. Right.
Because what people were doing was they were taking the valuation of Netflix and they were superimposing that on Disney's Netflix type product and then adding the rest of the company.
Right. And people looked at per subscriber valuations, not looking at the economics of a subscriber. Oh, you've got 10 subscribers, it's worth X. 100's worth Y. Didn't matter if they were good subscribers or bad subscribers, profitable subscribers. At the same time, so Disney launches Disney Plus. Early 2020, you have a pandemic.
Right.
Right.
Everybody's stuck at home.
Everyone's stuck at home. No new content's being created.
Right.
No sports are being created. You start looking at your bills and saying,
why am I paying this?
Why am I paying for this?
Right.
And then, lo and behold, my friends at NBC launch Peacock. My friends at Viacom remerges with CBS and they create Paramount Plus.
Right.
And they launch these products for dirt prices, just cheaper than cheap. Mm-hmm. If you're someone who is price sensitive, you're like, wait, I can get Disney Plus and Peacock and Paramount in total for about $20 a month.
Plus Netflix.
Plus Netflix for another 10.
So now I'm at 30 versus 100.
Right. And by the way, let's put more and more great content in streaming. Let's starve our channels, right? because we need people to pay for streaming. Streaming is where the future is.
Right.
That's where the equity values
So
are.
let's put some new good shows just on streaming.
Yeah, let's load up streaming with great shit.
Right.
And let's keep the price low. Right. And let's go. And so in 2021, 22, these companies all got rewarded for being geniuses.
For streaming.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then Netflix has a huge hiccup in 2022.
What was the hiccup?
They stopped growing.
Okay.
Netflix stopped growing.
Oh, I remember this. The stock got rocked.
Stock got annihilated.
And they were stopped growing because they were losing. The people were starting to subscribe to these other streamers.
Well, and also post-pandemic, people were not stuck at home as much. They had raised prices a ton.
Right.
And their entry-level price had moved up so much that if you're price sensitive, there was no way for you to get into Netflix. Right?
Okay, got it.
But so what happened was up until like so let's just set it for everyone listening at home. Up until 2015 or so, the business was on solid footing, but maturing. Okay. 2015 and 2019, a little bit of crack, less growth, giving content to Netflix. And then 2019 to today, the wheels have come off the wagon, right?
So let me press this point just a second. So you said that post-COVID, Netflix had a hiccup.
Yep.
The other streamers were growing a lot.
Yep.
And I'm going to read something that you wrote.
Yep.
This is a pretty recent report. It's a quote. Netflix has won the streaming wars, period. And that Netflix has more subscribers and therefore can spend more on content and thereby attract more subscribers, a virtuous circle.
Yep.
So my question for you is, if all these other companies created streaming and were growing very, very rapidly, and Netflix had that hiccup, how did we get from there to Netflix won the streaming wars?
Yeah. It's a good question. And I have to admit, we never recommended Netflix until recently because I'm like, I didn't think the industry would ever be as
dumb as it has been.
But Netflix did something that was so smart. And this is something that Hulu had done. They started an ad tier at a very low price point. They said, guess what? If we've taken as much consumer spending as we could at these price points, let's open up another lower price point.
With ads.
And have the advertising, which has always been the case in media, except for HBO, let's have the ad market support consumer time on consumption, right? So if I pay $6 a month or so, $7 a month for Netflix with ads, there's another $10 a month coming in from the ad community for commercials, and that is equal.
So how much lower is if I pay for Netflix with no ads?
Right.
What does that cost versus paying for Netflix with ads?
Well, if you pay for the super duper package, it's $24 a month.
Okay.
And the low end package is $7.
Okay.
But they had run out of growth at their price points, right? And they
at the upper price
exactly.
points.
They opened up a price point that was so low that if you're thinking about churning, why would you ever churn $7 a month? It's a cup of Starbucks. My Starbucks every morning,
right?
It's equal to Netflix for a month.
And then advertising would add what you said, like another $10.
Exactly, and you're also tapping younger consumers, right? So the ad model has accelerated their growth. They also
why didn't the other streamers do this?
They have done it. The problem is they don't have the same look. You have 5 or 6 competitors now in this business, right? Netflix had got to a scale place. They had more users.
Right.
But now you have 4 companies battling out think about Apple, Max, Paramount Plus, and Peacock. Those 4 companies don't have a lot of scale. Well, they do, but to be fair, global scale, you need global scale. You need to have, where I got Netflix most wrong was I covered media my whole life, and I had never seen a U.S. company in video really penetrate the
outside
world.
the U.S.
Exactly. In the old days, international markets for U.S. companies were Australia, UK, and Canada. Do you know why? Because they speak English.
Right.
And there wasn't subtitles. There was not a big content factory in South Korea that they tapped into. Netflix changed that equation. So,
and they're the only streamer that's really done that.
Has the global scale, true global scale. And when I say scale, it's about revenues. They have $40 billion of revenues. More than half come from outside the U.S., right? So because they're a technology company, I cover Meta and Google, what you see is international markets are really, really important to the business models here. And because once you invest in the platform, the incremental cost of moving into a foreign market is quite low, right? Like once you build the content, and what Netflix has done really well is either with dubbing or subtitles or procuring content cheaply in other markets. They've created a user base that's comfortable with foreign content, right?
I actually, it's funny. I actually sometimes enjoy watching a foreign content show versus an English show because you have to watch the subtitles. I hate dubbing.
Yeah.
And if you have to watch the subtitles, you can't be on your phone.
Exactly.
You actually have to watch.
Exactly. I'll tell you, during the pandemic, Call My Agent, which is a show
Love that show.
Yeah.
French show.
Yeah. But we were stuck at home. And I'm like, here I am living a life in Paris, watching Parisians.
Right.
And
you're home in Connecticut.
I'm stuck in Westchester, right?
Exactly.
Or Lupin, same thing. It's a French
Love
show.
that show too.
Right, or Fauda. So you were able to see the world. But the problem you have now is there's too many streaming products, right? There's too many.
Tell me about it. I subscribe to them all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're that guy, right?
I am that guy.
Yeah, I think what's happened with streaming is in the older days, it's really hard to cancel your pay TV subscription, right? So if I go back to wanted to cancel HBO 10 years ago,
right,
and my wife would tease me with this, I would have to spend a Sunday night on the phone with Cablevision, waiting for someone to answer the phone because I want to cancel HBO. Hold on.
And you're going to have a nervous breakdown.
Exactly. And I'm like, for the 3 hours it took, I'll just keep it. Now it's just literally an icon on the screen or on your phone.
So are people...
churn is ridiculously high.
It's high.
Churn is 4 times higher in this new world than what it was in the old world.
Okay.
Because churn in the old world was...
Well, what does it mean? You click and then you can go back?
Exactly. And also because of the binge model, right? So what Netflix did is they gave you all your shows at once teed up, right? So you can watch a whole season. That was new. HBO never would do that, right? So The Sopranos, your reference of Steve Van Sant, once a week for 10 years, and it would come and it'd go. So churn was kind of elongated or deferred because of the non-binge nature of what that was, right?
Got it.
So these models now that exist are just inferior models.
So let's talk about that for a second. So let's take the best. What are Netflix's margins like now compared to what it was for the media company in 2005?
They're 28%. They're the highest in the industry, but Discovery Networks in their peak was like 50% margins, 45, right? Because broadcast had sports rights, their margins were always like mid-single digits or so, right? But so Netflix are good margins, really good margins, but they're the only ones who have margins like this.
So what are the other streaming companies like?
If we're lucky, we get 5 to 10%.
That's it
at this point in time.
So why are their margins so much lower?
Because they don't have the global scale, right? So
they don't have enough revenue.
They don't have enough revenue. You need to drive revenue, right? The other problem is, again, you're atypical, Steve, but most consumers would say, I've got Amazon Prime as part of my Amazon shipping.
Right.
I've got Netflix. Maybe I have 1 or 2 more, right? So to be considered that 3rd or 4th one, you need always on grade content, right? So in any given month, the average consumer may say, well, now that White Lotus is over, why am I paying for HBO Max, right? Now that Landman's off the air, why am I paying for Paramount Plus, right? Yeah. So you can basically...
I'm addicted to what's his name?
Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah. The guy's unbelievable.
He's amazing. But the problem is that in the older model, you had a bundle of choice. Here the choices are a la carte, right? It's like going to a buffet in Vegas, paying one price and saying, look at all this food.
Right.
Versus going to a fancy restaurant and only having to pick one thing from each menu, right? Not everyone go to the restaurant and you're not going to order everything from the menu, right? So the buffet is a better model.
So how do you see this playing out in terms of, so you have, Netflix is obviously a winner.
Yep.
Amazon Prime is always going to be with us.
It's tied to shopping.
Because of Amazon.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Prime, you get it for free.
Exactly.
You have Paramount, Apple, Peacock, Stars,
exactly.
Max.
Exactly.
Who do you see winning and who do you see losing?
Well, Walt Disney's there too because Disney owns Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN. They have a very strong position. They're third.
They're third.
Second, third, right? You need consolidation, right? You need for these products to come together to create their own bundle, either artificially, meaning not to merge like Hulu Max, a Max plus Peacock bundle, which is maybe happening, or you need a merger of just less competition.
You need Max to buy Peacock and merge it all together. But the problem is they have the legacy businesses.
Right. You also have a DOJ that may not be amenable to liberal media companies getting healthier at this point in time.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So we're in this really tough place where, and today is, a bad day for the market, but, Warner Brothers and Paramount, their values are a fraction of what they were, 5 years ago, right? And it's hard to see unless there's...
It's almost an embarrassment when you think that Warner Brothers market cap is $21 billion versus Netflix is $400 billion.
Exactly.
It's like a joke.
Well, yeah, and especially when you had HBO, there was a great quote.
That was the premier content.
A quote from Netflix like 10 years ago, maybe longer, that said, our goal is to be HBO faster than HBO becomes Netflix, right? So Netflix saw what HBO was offering, this great content. HBO was global, still is. And they basically started moving into their world faster than HBO could move into Netflix's world.
So you see the only out for some of these companies is consolidation.
Exactly. Yeah. Because Amazon, you compete with Amazon, you compete with Apple.
So let's talk about Apple for a second.
Yep.
So the way I think about Apple, and I do watch a lot of Apple shows. I watch a lot of shows.
I think Apple's
period.
got pound for pound the best shows.
Yes, it's
pound.
very heavily curated.
Yes.
So it's not a lot of content, but it's very high quality
Without
content.
a doubt, yeah.
Is that a successful strategy for this world?
At this point, no, because they're not being able to scale. You need the combination. Here's the little secret about Netflix's consumption. Half of it is library older content, right? And Apple has
there's no library.
Exactly.
Right.
So
it's all new shows.
Yeah, so I come for a new show, but nothing keeps me around when that show's over. Right.
Unless there's another good new show.
So I think that one of the hidden secrets here is that Ted Sarandos, the head of Netflix, used to work in a video store. If you work in a video store, you understood that people would come in on a weekend to look for the latest titles. They couldn't get the latest titles. They also would go rent an older movie, or a kid's product, or a TV DVD. And I think I've been saying this for the past couple of years. This is like a retail business model. When I walk into a store, I'm looking for a certain thing. You want to upsell me to other things? You want me to stay in the store as long as I can and not shop someplace else, right?
So you need a lot of product.
Yeah, so someone once made a digging remark that Netflix is the Walmart of TV.
I can see that.
Yeah, that's a nice compliment because Walmart is the biggest retailer in the country.
So what's Apple? So if Apple currently has no library and only has new shows that are very good, like what's the end game for them? They need a library. They need something.
Yeah, but for Apple, this is just a rounding error, right? Like, this is more valuable. And my phone in my pocket is more valuable than any video show, right?
So you don't see them as a threat to Netflix ever at this point, given what they are.
I think they like what they're doing. They like their shows,
right? And they're fine.
Yeah, they have to figure out how to manufacture products outside of China, right? That's going to be
that's take a lot of their time.
That's probably my next year project. If I'm them.
Let's press that just for a second, just so we could talk about it. Apple basically manufactures all its products in China. The tariffs, now we're back to tariffs.
Exactly.
Tariffs are over 100%. All of a sudden, new iPhones are going to be double. They got to find, and you know what? You can't build a factory someplace else overnight. Doesn't work that way.
And we're not sure that Americans want to work in those jobs either, right?
Well, even if they did.
Right. You can't.
Let's say that they do.
Yep.
It takes at least 2 years to build the factory.
Yeah, and then the supply.
And you got to train the labor.
The supply chain. Where am I getting this product from? Like, how do I get it? Where's this product coming from? Meaning the physical product, right? The raw materials. I got to import those into this country.
Correct.
And no, this is
complicated.
This is complicated. So Apple, in terms of prioritization, not that high a priority.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's turn to Disney.
Yes, sir.
So market cap's been cut in half. Let's talk about what happened to Disney, and then we'll talk about some of the problems they're having with their entertainment.
Okay.
I remember when the stock was 300?
No, 190.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Basically 200.
Yeah, we couldn't understand why. That was during the pandemic when the parks were closed.
Parks were closed, but everybody was subscribing to their streaming.
And the valuation of their streaming business went up.
Correct. So what happened to Disney?
To me, the question is, Disney has 3 products, streaming products: ESPN, Disney Plus, and Hulu, right? Because of Disney's great brands, they've had a brand-driven strategy where, like, we don't really create one Uber app. We have these, either the tiles or separate. You have either the brands appear, on screen, or we're going to offer you one bundled product, right? Mm-hmm. I think what happened to Disney is is the Walmart comment. I think the way you fight Netflix and scale this business is smushing it all together into one app called.
So it's a lot of stuff.
Called Disney.
Right.
So I am a New York Ranger fan, and they watched the terrible game they lost the other night. When that terrible game is over, I watch Family Guy in the app. Right. Like you don't want me to leave after I watch something and go hunting and pecking someplace else.
Right.
Disney has enough amazing content inside Disney to keep me on that app and drive engagement, right? The problem is the way they've gone to market, and it's changing, it's been siloed.
So Disney, Hulu, ESPN.
Right. Let's make one app. They hire a new CTO from YouTube, and they're talking about creating more of a connected product, right?
Okay.
The Disney problem also too is, look, they have a lot of profitability from legacy cable networks, right? And those cable networks are in decline because of cord cutting, right?
Okay.
The problem right today, this day you mentioned, is Disney's biggest business is theme parks and cruise ships. They've done an amazing job. But people are very worried about a recession, about consumer spending, right? We think Disney is worth a lot more than it is today. They're going to change leadership, so there's going to be succession coming.
Right.
We don't know who it's going to be. But Disney's value, the assets are not, they're worth a lot more than the stock is today. But I think people are not willing to give them a premium until they can prove that they have a real long-term defendable moat in streaming, a la Netflix, right?
I see. Okay.
You need to build a business that people could say year in, year out, this business is going to grow top line 15, 20%,
Right.
grow margins on top of the park business, which is a good business, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's discuss a different aspect of Disney, which is not necessarily a pure business aspect. So now it can be revealed. I own one of the largest digital comic book collections on planet Earth.
Yep.
It's 11,000 comics. I've read all 11,000. So when it comes to discussing Marvel movies, I have a right to an opinion because I could write a dissertation on the material.
Yep.
And I'm also a fantasy novel and science fiction novel nut.
Okay.
So we could talk about Star Wars.
Okay.
So Disney bought Lucasfilm.
Yep.
And in my view, totally screwed it up. I mean, I think the Star Wars sequels that they did were generally pretty bad. And most of the Star Wars series that they've created on streaming are poor.
With the exception of the first Mandalorian?
With the exception of the first season of Mandalorian, maybe season 2.
Yeah.
I can't let's just stick with Star Wars for a second. I can't understand how Disney, which is so story driven, could have screwed this up so badly. What is the gossip in the industry about it?
It's about leadership, right? The people around the studio have not done a good job. You need to turn that over. Yeah.
And they haven't.
Yeah, that's it's funny because in 2014 or 15, they bought Lucasfilm.
Right. Everybody was excited.
They turbocharged the stock. Yeah, they need to get that going. One of the things, I know we talk about Marvel too, is that maybe there's just a limit to how much bandwidth and how much time you can spend on these properties, right? You need, to do anything of the highest order, I think the more you're stretched in terms of your time and more projects you have going, there's a real risk that you're doing
too much.
Exactly.
Well, forget about too much. I mean, we'll talk about Marvel in a second. I mean, they bought Lucasfilms, and then they did three Star Wars movies, and they were all pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I was shocked. I mean, you bought this product, and this is the best you can do. It was actually disturbing.
The choice of director has something to do with it, maybe, right? Like didn't they have J.J. Abrams do the,
I can't remember who did it, but it was just bad.
No, it's I tell you, because when you see a great Marvel movie, I always say, who directed that, right? Because you can tell there's this creativity that's just popping at the screen.
But let's turn to Marvel movies. So Kevin, how do you pronounce it? Feige?
Yeah.
So he really created a great product. He had a coherent story. And then the story ended with the last Avenger movie.
Yeah.
It's been a disaster ever since.
Yeah.
What's the gossip there? I mean, I think he probably needs to go. They need new blood.
Feige's not going anywhere. I think what Bob Iger said is, when it came to Disney Plus, they overextended Marvel. They basically spent so much time doing Marvel TV series that they didn't they didn't have the energy. They couldn't build more movies. So what you're saying is this. I agree with what you're going to say, which is, Disney should focus on starting over and building great film properties, right? Like you need to basically...
The most recent Captain America movie, horrendous.
I'm putting words in your mouth, but the reality is I think they would say, we called a timeout. Like some of the stuff that's in the pipeline was rushed from a couple years ago.
Right.
But they would not disagree with you. Like, they...
See, I'll give you my view of what the basic problem is. Yep. So when now I'm going to use my comic book lore. Okay. So in the 1970s, there was a storyline. It was the Kree-Skrull War combined with Thanos, the Cosmic Cube. It was a whole thing, and it was such a powerful story that every comic book character, just about at one point or another, was involved. The Avengers were always involved. Yeah. There was an original Captain Marvel who died of cancer, by the way. And then at some point at the end of the 70s, it ended.
Yeah.
And there were several years after that where there was no great storyline. Each comic had its own story, but there was no great overarching storyline. And I kind of lost interest in some of the comics for a while. That's what I think has happened to Disney. The Thanos story ended, and they have been unable to find another story.
Yeah, it's funny to say because last year they actually had a pretty good year at the box office. Not tied to Marvel. Well, they had Deadpool, which was it's interesting, but it's not.
I think it's over. I think Deadpool's overrated, in my opinion.
Your criticism is fair.
It ain't easy to come up with another new story.
I was going to say it sounds easy, but it's not, right?
Well, one of the reasons why I think it's very hard is you had this, because they don't really control Spider-Man. You had this core group of characters: Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America. And at the end of the last Avenger movies, Iron Man is dead. Thor is 90, so he's basically dead. And unfortunately, they made Thor into a comedic joke, which, by the way, I object to enormously because Thor was always one of my absolute favorite characters. I love Norse mythology. And they made my Thor into a like a Borscht Belt comedian. That's I found it upsetting.
Yeah.
So you've lost your three major characters. Like, where do you go? That I think is the core problem.
Yeah, where do you go? Exactly.
And with whom?
But it's funny because the run they had was an epic run. It's like
epic.
It's like Michael Jordan.
Yes.
But I mean, you've done this job like I've done this job. Greatness is fleeting, right? It is hard to consistently be great at anything we do, right? It just is. It is challenging to wake up every day and try to create great content. And these guys did it for a long, long time, right?
By the way, the Daredevil reboot is very good. I don't know if you've watched it.
No, I've not watched it.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
It's excellent. It's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. It's funny. I am not I'm not a superhero fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I am.
I know, exactly. I tend to be sports and news and comedy.
Okay.
So
I do that too.
Yeah.
But I love comic books. I always have, which is why what's happened to the Marvel. I found the new Captain America movie boring, which is death for a superhero film. It was just boring.
Yeah. Yeah. Can't have that.
Can't have that.
No.
All right, we're going to switch gears.
Okay.
We've talked about a lot of. We've killed media.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's turn.
We killed Disney.
Yeah, we killed Disney. Unfortunately, we'll say cottage for it.
Exactly.
Let's talk about a little bit of AI and Facebook and Google.
Yep.
So let's start with because you're a media guy. You're not. I'm not going to ask you about the latest NVIDIA chip.
No.
That's not your thing.
No, and it's funny is the more that becomes the thing in internet advertising stocks, the harder it is, right? Because my core strength is understanding advertising dollars and relative strengths of different products. Technology is now all about chips. It's about chips and it's about CapEx, right?
Right.
And there's a level of knowledge that I haven't spent my life dealing with.
You're not an engineer.
Yeah, exactly.
Neither am I.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about one thing that I'm hearing.
Right.
which is, and we all use Google search.
Yep.
What are you hearing about the problems that Google is having integrating AI into its search, and what threats that is creating? Because search is Google, other than YouTube.
Yeah, this is. I mean,
this is core.
This is the narrative on Wall Street, right? Which is that Google has lost their monopoly in search because of ChatGPT,
right,
and Perplexity and Grok,
right.
This is the narrative on Wall Street, and the challenge that Google has is they created a business that again, like pay TV, as good a business you'll ever find with search.
Monopoly.
That was based on links, where you surface links that would take you to different websites or mobile sites, right? You type in, need a Yankee jersey, and 5 websites would come up, right? Now in AI, you could say, well, I need the best Yankee jersey, and hopefully there'll be one answer, right? So people will not be bidding for links. There'll be the best, cheapest place to buy a Yankee jersey is XYZ down the street. So the risk is that the business model of paying for keywords, the keywords being a Yankee jersey, it's going to be less in demand because there will not be 5 people competing for that best Yankee jersey.
So but what you're telling me is that AI will give you an honest answer.
AI will give you a non-commercial answer.
Right. So in other words, it's an answer that maybe the entity that shows up didn't pay Google anything to show up.
Right. So I have a great team of people work with us. Mike Morton covers e-commerce. When the year started, he did a report about using ChatGPT and AI products to find the best running shoes for flat feet people, right? So
that's important, especially for people who have flat feet.
Exactly. He said, find me the best running shoes for flat feet. And he used all these products. And he also then did a standalone piece of research on his own, reading blogs and looking at things to figure out what the best shoes were.
For flat feet.
Exactly. Then he lined up what gave him the best answers. And it turns out that OpenAI, ChatGPT gave him some pretty good answers. And he was not getting served up non-correct. He wasn't getting served for commercial answers. He was getting served up, to your point, the right answer, right? So the challenge is Google has built a business where 5 people who sell sneakers send you an ad. You're not sure if they're the best sneaker company.
But they bought the rights to flat feet sneakers.
Exactly. I want to pay $1 for that keyword, right? So the risk is, how does Google integrate AI? And they've been doing AI longer than anyone. They are the leaders of global AI.
Right.
Because they've been doing it for more than a decade. They had 2 of the best research shops around. They made their own chips. They have data centers. This is not a surprise to Google. I mean, in fact, if you look at what search it was, or even YouTube, AI is all over that product. You know how you type a sentence in your search bar and it completes the sentence, right?
Right.
Well, that's AI, right? They know the next 3 words are going to be, right? The challenge that Google has, and I'm not as worried as the market, so call me crazy, but I understand the worry, is that the challenge Google has is, can Google stop this innovation and a younger group of users using ChatGPT? Can they innovate using their own AI?
Gemini.
Exactly. To train you to use their Gemini and not ChatGPT. And then once they train you to use their AI to find the best sneakers, they need some way to monetize that.
That's not so easy this time around.
It's not so easy this time around. Not at all. But what they have that no one else has is they have great identification of who you are, Steve. They know where you live in whatever season it is.
Right.
They know your golf index. They know everything about you because you probably use Waze or Google Maps.
Yep.
We probably use YouTube.
I do.
You may use Gmail.
I do.
Right. That's a huge head.
That's a lot of information.
Start, right. So my pitch is, yes, it'll be a fragmentation of users. The world's going to change. They don't have a monopoly in search queries.
Right.
But they have better than anyone in terms of the ability to drive you an ad in all different forms that's going to be better suited and tailored for you than anything else, right? Okay. So, but I'm worried.
To be determined.
Yeah,
but it's a risk.
But I'm worried because just big picture, without being an engineer, this is a trick that you probably had too. when there's an industry where money is being invested to compete in the industry, like laying fiber cables in Westchester or building more cars in the world, I don't want to be in a business where people are putting capital in to build more things. I want to be a business where capital's coming out.
Okay, so you're saying Google's in a business where the whole world is investing in to compete with it, basically.
Yeah, and almost irrationally, people are just throwing money to build data centers.
Yeah, hundreds of billions of dollars.
And buy NVIDIA chips without knowing what the end looks like.
I understand.
So what worries me just from a thematic standpoint is, historically, sectors that have this intensity of capital that's rising are not good sectors, right?
Right.
Like Moffett covers telecom. Well, there was a time when all of us had landlines, right? And then all of a sudden people started building mobile satellites and towers. And all of a sudden
the landline business.
Exactly right?
For those of you out there, people used to have landline phones.
Exactly, yeah. So just in theory, and if I can't answer your question perfectly about how does Google pivot, then the average investor is going to say, when you have the answer, Michael, call me. But at this point in time, it doesn't sound really good because my two kids in high school, this is what people will say, are using ChatGPT every night to do their homework, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's,
All right, so let's pivot for a second to Facebook.
Yes,
so I don't really use Facebook.
Yep.
So, but what I don't understand is Facebook Meta is spending insane amounts of money on AI.
Yep.
What are they trying to do in AI with Facebook? Because I'm so unfamiliar with Facebook.
Right.
And so I use X a lot, but I've never really used Facebook. So what are they trying to do?
They're trying to build the next standard platform. So here's the answer. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't like to have his app on an Apple phone where Apple dictates the rules about how you use Meta or the Facebook app on his phone, right?
Explain that for a second.
So about 5 years ago, 3 years ago, they changed the rules.
Apple did.
Apple did. So if you use Facebook on your phone, Facebook was able.
Most people do.
Right? Were able to track you when you went to Chipotle to buy some burritos, right?
From Facebook.
Right. So the app would track you. You left Meta, Facebook to go to Chipotle to buy some burritos.
Right.
Then you went to a gaming app and played some games, right?
Okay.
So in that one example, Meta knew that you liked Chipotle and you liked gaming. And then, so what happens? If you are a competitor to Chipotle, you're like, I want to find 100 people who live in this town who like Chipotle. Right. Because I want to offer them Arby discounts, Arby coupons.
So they would advertise on Facebook to this person.
Right. And if you're a gaming company, if you play 5 hours of games a week, I want to sell you some gaming, right? So Apple changed the rules about what you can track on mobile phones a couple of years ago.
Made it harder.
And Meta's results were terrible for about 5 quarters.
Right.
Then, thanks to the brilliance of their engineers, they figured out some workarounds, and now they have targeting that is pretty good, right? But Mark Zuckerberg's point was, Apple changed the rules on me, right? They made it harder for me, and they changed the rules of what I could track, and I don't want to be susceptible to Apple. And by the way, the other big mobile phone operator is Android, owned by Google, and Google hasn't changed the rules. But
they could.
Why not? They're Google,
right? And
they're being challenged in search. Why wouldn't they become a little more aggressive, right?
Okay, so what is he trying to achieve?
He's trying to achieve a way to build a future platform, basically they have these Ray-Ban glasses where basically the hope is that you would use AI on glasses. Like basically you walk down the street, I know that it's you, Steve, so a little picture of you will come up on my lens and say, that's Steve. Don't forget Steve has X many kids and lives X, Y, and Z. Tell Steve about like you're a kid or about, the connection you have. So they're trying to basically create are they
trying to create a substitute to the phone?
Yeah, a universe that doesn't exist on your phone, right?
That's complicated.
Yes, but they're doing it with a thing called Reality Labs, which is like their investment in AI-enabled either screens or glasses or something to take the power out of the hands of Apple and Google. Okay. Right? They also want to create AI that's open source because they're meaning free. Their point is, if we have businesses that use Llama, their open source product, they can build all kinds of great tools using our product without having to pay software developers for the right to build on their products. And these companies then can use, if you're Delta Airlines, you could use Meta's AI to build a chatbot that helps me plan my next vacation with Delta. If my flight's delayed going to Atlanta, it'll pop up on my Meta app, and it'll say, "Hey, Michael, Delta's telling me that I could change your flight." So they're trying to build business tools for essentially free that makes their advertisers more connected to Meta.
Okay.
And rather than charge where other people are charging for these things, they want to give it away for free. And by open source, they have more developers develop on this platform. It gets better and better and better, right? Okay. So I think Mark sees this world as zero sum. It's like, look, we don't want to be ever. And if you listen to him on his conference calls, his earnings calls, he hints at this idea of like, look, we want our own independence. We don't want to be tied to someone else's practices.
Let's talk about Apple just for a second, given tariffs. What is management's saying about what the hell are they going to do?
So far, nothing. Craig Moffett has a sell on Apple. He's one of the only people who's got a sell on Apple. This wasn't the thesis. The thesis was it was an expensive stock, that they don't have an AI strategy at this point in time. They haven't invested the way others have.
What about the thesis, though, that as AI gets bigger and there are more apps, it'll be on the phone, so they're the beneficiary because they're the distributor?
Yeah, it's going to come, right? Yeah,
eventually.
But there's a point in which that whole thesis was priced in, that that was in the stock,
right?
Yeah, and now it's maybe not in the stock. No, we don't know what company's going to do
with respect to the manufacturing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a bunch of there's been reports that they have enough inventory here for the time being. They were smart about bringing things forward. But Steve, it's a real question, and it's important because the ecosystem is driven by. Apple creates an ecosystem of services and businesses and apps that people have made a lot of money on. And if you can't drive a new upgrade cycle for everybody, it's a problem. It really is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if there's anything else we need to cover.
Okay.
Oh, let's talk quickly just about the cable companies.
Yep.
Like, what the hell are they doing in this world?
Oh, that's Craig's world too. So these stocks, like my media stocks, so Comcast and Charter, they were kings, right? They were kings. They were great stocks.
Right.
The problem is that video, as we know, is in decline. Pay TV is in decline. They've stopped adding broadband data subs as well, right? So basically, there's a real fear that the telecom companies are going to take their customers away, and we'll all be moving to data in my house from T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T. Craig would say that's a ridiculous idea because they don't have the capacity to do that. But they're pushing hard into his mobile phone. They're trying to get you a Charter to sign up for a bundle with mobile phone plus
So they're trying
data.
to attack
They're trying to attack, exactly. But they have a really favorable deal called MVNO. So they don't own a lot of mobile plant, right? They're renting it or getting it really favorably from Verizon, right? So they're
sounds like the Netflix story.
Exactly. So Verizon cut them a deal to keep them out of the business, so they're able to sell their products below what others can because of the MVNO.
What's MVNO?
Oh gosh, sending network. Good. That's a good question. So MVNO. Do you want me to go get my phone out?
No, forget it.
I need Craig.
This is their product.
Yeah. Well, they basically, Charter doesn't have, a mobile backbone. Exactly. They don't have the towers.
Right.
But they're renting it.
They're renting it from
I think in
providers.
perpetuity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's it? Someone's going to write into us and say the MVNO stands for what?
Doesn't sound like it's a great place to be.
No, you can. So
I mean, I think years ago I would want to be Brian Roberts, who runs Comcast. And now I don't want to be Brian Roberts.
So for those investing at home, the trick is to find businesses that are monopolies before the government knows that they're monopolies, right? And that's Nick Del Deo's famous quote, who works with us. And you want to find companies that have high moats, high barriers to entry, in other words, pricing power, just the run of the table. And the things we talked about today, except for Netflix maybe, and Apple's phone products, and Google search at one point, there are not that many moats left, right? The moats are being attacked in our world
Yes.
in a way that wasn't the case when I first started, right? And that's why these stocks trade where they were, where they are, where they were. 20 years ago, they had these high barriers to entry, and
they've eroded.
Exactly. Some of it by their own stupidity, right? Some by fire. Some, no, that's a song from Bad Sisters. But some of just by stupidity, and some by technology.
Leonard Cohen.
Yeah,
Leonard Cohen wrote it, and Leonard Cohen wrote that song.
Yeah.
He wrote it. We're talking about a song written by Leonard Cohen called "Who by Fire."
Yeah.
He wrote it after the 1967 Six-Day War. He went to visit Israel. He toured around. He was really impressed, and that trip led to that song.
Really?
And he wrote it and he sang it, and he had that very, very deep voice. But Bad Sisters has a version of it, which is it's done. Leonard Cohen wasn't the best singer in the world.
He's great,
but it was great.
Yeah.
But so if you ever want to listen to that
I didn't
song,
know that.
He wrote it and he has the original version.
That's why I came on
something
today. That's why I'm here. It's called "Who by Fire."
Who by Fire.
It's a great song.
Yeah.
Yeah. "Who by Fire."
He was an incredible writer.
Yeah.
Incredible poet.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. When you listen to that song, I think about what the things I cover.
Right.
Yeah. "Who by Fire."
It's very biblical.
It's great.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The last question before we turn to something more fun. Google antitrust case. Given everything that's happened, why are we still pursuing? Why is the government still pursuing the Google antitrust case?
This is Google's argument, right?
Right.
It's like
we're fighting for our lives.
This is a backwards looking idea, right? Like, look at all the people. Yeah, I'm not that worried about Google's antitrust case. I am not. I also think the bigger worry about that is Apple, because Apple gets paid a fortune by Google to have Apple search default to Google search, right?
Right.
So when you use Safari search engine is Google.
Right.
And Google pays Apple a big traffic acquisition cost, a fee
to do that.
To do it.
And the government's attacking it.
Yeah, that goes away.
In this case.
That's really bad for Apple.
Okay.
It's really bad for Apple. But Google, look, I am worried about competition, but what Google does, we talk about your Marvel movies. What Google does, we take for granted. The greatness of their products, we take for granted. It just works all the time.
Right.
Right? We accept that to be the case, but it's hard to do what they've done, around the world.
Yes.
So
all right.
okay.
So let's end with something new.
Okay.
That we're going to do hopefully on the show pretty much every episode.
Okay.
Since I'm a TV junkie and you're a TV
I am
junkie,
yeah.
You get an opportunity to recommend on streaming a new show and an old show. You go first.
Okay, an old show. Can we say like Bad Sisters? That's
an old show.
It's a great show.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't like the second season. Did you?
Yeah. Was this the second season now?
Yeah, now it was the second season.
The
first season was great.
Yeah. I like the visual. I like the way it feels. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so I'll give you another Apple show, Severance.
That's excellent.
Exactly. Apple just has a way of kind of bringing you into an environment like HBO, right?
Right.
Like
what HBO used to be.
White Lotus is another show like that, right? So a new show. Landman, I started it.
Superb.
Yeah, so there you go.
Superb. Just superb. Taylor Sheridan. I don't understand how Taylor Sheridan could write so much material because I watch every single show he creates, and they're all good.
I think the lesson today is let's not take it for granted.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That's a master at work, right?
Yes, he's a
like
master.
Spielberg.
Yes, he's a master. It's amazing.
A genius.
He has this show called Lioness, and in the second season, not only did he write it, he's in it.
Really?
Yes.
and by the way, where does he find the time for that?
I don't know. I had enough hours in the day.
He can't play golf. No way. But Steve, how about you? What are your favorite?
Okay, so my favorite new show, which I just finished watching, is a Shonda Rhimes show on Netflix called The Residence.
Okay.
Which is it's a murder mystery. It's called The Residence because it takes place in the White House residence.
Okay.
And it's I think it's 8 episodes, but it's funny.
Okay.
So it's a murder mystery that's funny.
On Netflix.
On Netflix.
Because that's where she's working these days.
So I'll give a couple of old shows. So I will stake my reputation on the statement that the greatest science fiction series ever done was the remake of Battlestar Galactica, which was like around 2005, 6, 7, and 8.
Okay.
That's hands down. And you're talking to someone, by the way, who has literally watched every single Star Trek movie and series ever made. Battlestar Galactica is better than all of them.
Okay.
Hands down. And then in terms of older shows, which you should watch, I would recommend Warrior on Netflix.
Okay.
And the guy who created Warrior also created his earlier series is a series called Banshee. So you watch Warrior and Banshee.
Okay.
You'll be happy.
We can do a show on this all day long.
Oh, I can talk about this for hours.
You know what was really good? The making of The Godfather.
Oh, the Order. What was it called? The Order?
No, something like the
something or another. Yeah, you didn't know. I know. I watched it. It was great.
It was great.
It was great.
It was amazing.
It really was good.
Yeah. Don't you love great content?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very good.
Yeah. Yeah. There's never been better content than now.
Yeah.
The
content's unbelievable.
Yeah. There have been worse business models than now.
There's an Apple show you should watch, which I don't think did that well, but it's called Drops of God.
Oh, Drops of
Wine.
It was great. It was amazing.
Amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really great.
Beautiful show.
Yeah. We could talk. We'll have another. You know what? We're going to do something in the future. We'll have you back, and we'll just talk stuff to watch.
Okay. You got it. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you all, and see you next time on the next episode of the Eisman Playbook. Thank you so much for tuning in. For video episodes of this podcast, head over to our YouTube channel. If you're listening on a podcast platform, make sure to follow the show so you never miss a new episode. And if you got something out of today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. For links to our website, social media, and to sign up for our newsletter, please check out the show notes of today's episode. On that note, I'm Steve Eisman. I'll see you on our next episode. Podcast is produced by Collier Landry for Don't Touch My Radio and Steve Cohn for Next Horizon Media. Copyright Stephen Eisman, Farseer LLC.